All right, John. Today is the 2nd of February, and you are in Portugal. Finally, it's sunny after long weeks of rain. Yeah, I would like to ask, before everything, how are you doing in Portugal?
Well, on a morning like this, what can I say? This is the first really warm, sunny morning, at least that I've experienced since last, I suppose, September in England. Since coming here, much to my surprise, in what I thought was sunny Portugal, the weather's been just like it is in England. Cold and foggy and damp. And we've spent much of the time just sitting in front of a lovely wood fire in the house, which has actually been very nice, very quiet, done a lot of meditating, very, very quiet. And so long as I remember to be here now and present, well, I couldn't be happier. And today, just look, the very first insects, little ants, the funny little insects, I don't know, all of them are beginning to crawl on the warm cement and fill my heart with joy. Little brothers reappearing after the long winter. I've seen the first butterfly just fly up over there. There you are, that brings a smile to an old man's heart, doesn't it? Just like that. Actually, we've had some very, very happy days. One of the nicest experiences was, at least for me, was being the local laundrette, folding clothes. That's a sweet, simple action. But just being totally there and just folding these nice, warm, clean clothes just filled me with such joy. They really are the best. Best things in life are free, aren't they?
So you are happy.
Yeah.
What else brings you happiness?
This morning again, I was just sweeping the terrace there because there are dogs in the house and they leave a lot of hair and of course their paws bring in sand and a lot of mess. And, just sweeping the terrace. I was the happiest man in the world. You couldn't have made me any happier. Not all the riches and pleasures of this world can compare with just sweeping the terrace off of the dog's mess and putting it in the dustbin and cleaning the brush afterwards and standing it back where it belongs against the wall. Really, I've always loved just doing simple things like that, and I never tire of them. I could do that every day for the rest of my life, not ask for anything more.
You said once that you only do things for love. That's the only way to do things because it's effortless.
Well, of course I do forget sometimes, but fortunately not so often these days. It seems to be fairly natural in me. Yes, it seems almost grotesque to do things to get the job done or for some result. Of course, the result comes by doing the job well, doesn't it? You end up with a clean terrace and the clothes nicely folded. But that's somehow the side effect. vastly just to be here now. Just look at there's a bit slight breeze, just blowing the grass on the lawn a bit. A few distant sounds. There's a little wren that appears in one of the trees in the garden. I was watching that too. Golly, I think it's still there. Look, it's up in that tree behind us, on that bit of dead creeper. Or is that a leaf? I'm not sure. Can't see this distance. But anyway, such sweet little things. Another sweet thing, there's this little wild cat here that scratched my hands to pieces, and I thought I'd never be able to get anywhere with her. And this morning, to my great, unbelievable joy, the little thing jumped up on my lap and sat there all through meditation. I wanted to cough, but I didn't dare cough. I was so frightened to disturb her. Fortunately, I just managed a few sort of half coughs, and she forgave me and didn't run away. That sort of thing is what could be more wonderful than that?
I know that now you don't aim for nothing, just God. And there's no goal. But what would you say to a child that is, there's nothing that we might want to do in this world, there's nothing to do in this world?
One of the great discoveries of spiritual life is that there are levels. There are many, many levels of consciousness, levels of everything. In human life we see it in terms of growing up, don't we? Growing up from being a child, being a teenager, to being a young man or woman, then an adult, and then gradually we merge into old age. And at each stage, our understanding develops. Everything changes, really, doesn't it? Our abilities, and I love some lines of poetry. I am old and you are young, and we speak a different tongue. A lot of things I'd love to convey when I see young people agonizing over the world and that, which I did in my time, I assure you, but I don't now. But we can't really mature before our time, can you? We can't hurry it. We cannot become holier than we are. So, what can we say to those coming on? Well, I count myself fortunate that quite early in life, there wasn't much choice when I was young. It was the normal thing to do, that in every house there was a Bible, and the simple Bible stories were introduced to me at a very early age. Of course, being a lover of animals then, as throughout my life, the ones I liked best were the ones about animals. Noah's Ark and those other nice stories about the Good Shepherd. I always loved that. So those little early lessons sank into me, and the word God, whatever that meant. I learnt the Lord's Prayer, Our Father which art in heaven. I don't suppose it meant much to me, but it became part of my childish consciousness. Then I went to school and had compulsory scripture lessons. I don't say I sort of made much of them, but they were just part of the curriculum. We were just taught them. No choice. And also we had to attend chapel. There was a school chapel, and at least every day and twice on Sundays we had to attend, and then we had to kneel by our bed and say our prayers before we got into bed at night. So I was nourished with these words, these lovely words, and we didn't want them, we did not want them. They were just part of what we were fed with. Before every meal a grace was said. just simple words. For what we are about to receive, may the Lord make us truly thankful. And then afterwards, for what we have received, may God's holy name be praised, I think. So that word God was put into my young mind without question, really, at an early age. And I'm very grateful for that. Really, I am deeply grateful. It makes me feel great. I'm sad that so many young people today in our sort of the new ideas that have come into education are deprived of that. They don't have that experience. I think they're the poorer for it, really I am. Because like many people, after I left school, I wouldn't say I rejected the religion I'd been taught, but I certainly moved on from it. It didn't really satisfy me when I started asking the big questions, and so I started reading Eastern philosophies, and I found them very helpful indeed in broadening my understanding of what it was all about. And I still do, and then I learnt to meditate, which again took me out of the normal Christian sort of tradition that I'd been brought up in. And I've always stayed a rather sort of, not so much feeling that I've rejected the church, but that the church has rejected me. So I felt an outsider really from our local English tradition, until very, very recently when now that I've collected an audience on YouTube, much to my surprise, at least a few members of our local church have also, I think, have sat up and taken notice. Well.
You told me that in the school of meditation where you were in London, there were two parts. One more intellectual, and another one more heart.
Well, I was referring really to another school there, but yes, actually, my first wife, that I really discovered, I didn't really have any understanding of these things at the time, but much later on, when I came to consider the difficulties we had in understanding each other, I learnt that one way you can describe our different characters are how some of us are motivated more by the intellect. They like to ask questions and have reasons. They like to sort of, they ask questions like, what is God? How does it work? How can God allow this, that and the other, you know? And other people which are more like me are of the heart, less of the intellect and of the heart. I'm not really very interested in intellectual questions. I don't read those sort of books, and at least not much, not now. And to me it's just more simple. It's just a matter of loving God. I can sit here and I don't really need to ask questions about what sort of plants these are, or what this or what that. I just feel a total open love for everything. And that I find is completely satisfying.
The question and the intellect puts us far away from what is.
It's a dangerous thing to. I wouldn't venture to judge between that. In some ways, the way of the intellect is probably more steady, like that, more reasonable. Whereas those of us who are more of the heart tend to go up and down, you know, have highs but also lows. I've been very high in my life, but I've also been very low. You know, love is quickly followed by despair, isn't it? So I wouldn't really dare to suggest one is better than the other. It's just two different sorts of people. I'm sure both are valid. The Bible doesn't tell us to understand God, does it? Or even to know God. It tells us to love him. That's the first commandment. Love God. Although when I began to think, I asked, well, how can I love what I don't know? What is God anyway? But these sort of questions lead you into all sorts of inquiries. Those sort of questions don't worry me too much now.
Is to know God feeling God?
I suppose for me it is. Feel God, and what do we mean by that? What do I feel? Sitting here now. Well, the word that comes to my mind, I feel I'm held. I think, like I've always in life, wanted to be held by loving arms. And somehow that has become, that has evolved into all that, into the invisible arms. That's it, really. Yes, that's right. It's really quite a childish thing, I suppose, that just basic wanting to belong, to be held, to love and be loved, has now is finally found its expression in the invisible, because the invisible to me now is actually, I think I can really say, more real to me now than the visible. It's certainly more enduring, it's more lasting, it's more sure, isn't it? Because the visible comes and goes. You know, we love the summer day, we love the presence of a loved person. But the great lesson of life is that here today and gone tomorrow. The Lord gives, the Lord takes away. But this invisible presence is with us always. We can never not be there. Well, that's if you practice as much as I've done. Finally, our worldly disappointments are made whole in spirit. Spirit, of course, being God.
You spoke about undefinable, like freedom, love, joy, spirit, silence. If we cannot define it, how can we know it?
That's a lovely question. Another important realization for me was that, as I spoke earlier about levels, you see, levels of knowledge. Again, think of a child with his first little book of knowledge, and then of a clever professor at university or something with some much more elaborate sort of apparatus of knowledge. Knowledge also develops and grows throughout our lives. But, as I understand it now, the moment you know something, you actually put a little box around it. You contain it with this thing called knowledge. And knowledge is really a description. You can describe it. And once you describe something, you put it in a box. You can describe this, then you describe that. And so the two are separate, aren't they? You know this and you know that. So you know separation. All of which really comes under the general heading of duality. A world where you look at it in terms of this or that, knowing this and not knowing that, so you're always seeking for more knowledge because you're aware of things that you don't know. And you want to know it, you want to somehow capture it within a human ability to give it a name and form and discover something, and discover a new species of insect or something and give it a name. Put it in the insect book of insects. Well now, if you begin, as has always been natural to me, to lift up your eyes to the hills, look at the horizon, which you can here in this little garden, lovely sort of mountains really more than hills, and beyond that's the sky. Well, I find great comfort in that. The sky, there are a few light clouds in it today. Last night there were stars. I stood out on the terrace and just sort of melted into that infinite starlight. I think of the stars as my little brothers up there. It just seems to me such a natural, lovely thing to do. Feel at home up there. I remember when days when I used to sleep outside a lot. In times when I was in countries with good starlight, I'd just be in. Just couldn't, whoever wants to sleep in a room when you can be under the stars. Anyway, I'm sorry, I digress. Yes. Well, these things are really, how can you describe, beyond knowledge? That gives a clue, because you see, there's always a beyond, isn't there? This is the great discovery in spirituality. There's always a beyond. It's an absolute sure thing to follow in meditation. Whatever comes into your mind, go beyond it. Beyond and beyond and beyond. There's the call to adventure, my dears. That's the call to beyond. And then I started using, well, that's what faith is. Of course, suddenly the penny dropped. I understood. Faith is higher knowledge. That's exactly what it is, you see. Knowledge is a level like that. From ignorance to knowledge to beyond knowledge. Or ignorance to knowledge to faith. Now, faith, as to quote from the Bible again, is the evidence of things not seen. There you are. Again from the Bible, we are saved by faith. And time and again faith is referred to. And I never really understood what faith was until quite recently, when I began to say, well, it's simply this, what I'm talking about. It's looking to the stars. It's the beyond. It's that which stretches the heart of man. Stretches us ever onwards to the great adventure. Oh, faith is not blind, my dears. No, no, no. Faith is the true knowledge, is the real substance. Knowledge is what seems blind. Just like, you see, these eyes, I'm afraid of the eyes of mortality. These eyes see a world of death. The eyes see what comes to pass, but faith sees into the infinite, to the everlasting. You don't need to open your eyes to see with faith, you see with your heart, the eyes of the heart. these are just words, but sort of poetically you can describe it like that. Faith is the real language of love. Because when you love, you look beyond, don't you? You see into someone's eyes and you see beyond. You see into beyond what you can describe. It goes beyond words.
What would you say to a person without faith?
Well, yes, many people do have one. What can you say, dear? There's one wonderful thing I often say to people these days: God bless you. I don't know what to say. You can't. Some people seem to have faith very easily, and others don't. Faith may grow. I remember in my sort of discoveries of religion, people would often ask, well, how can I get faith? How can you change the leopard spots? I don't know. Sometimes we just have to accept as we are and keep searching, and you never know, faith may develop in us. I suppose my faith has developed over the years. We talk of our infant faith, and faith strengthens. That's just the phrase often used. Faith grows in strength, doesn't it? I suppose the way I'm talking now, you could say I have a strong faith. If I think back, certainly my faith wasn't always so confident because I felt I had to conform more to the ways of the world. I didn't have the confidence to stand on my own spiritual feet, as it were. I felt, people would say to me, why can't you be normal? And so I wouldn't have had the confidence to talk like this years ago. I'd have been, too shy or embarrassed to expose my heart in this way. For people would think, so you're being silly. Well, it's one of the blessings of getting older. You can. Don't worry so much about what other people think. You sing your own song.
Only when you drink from the river of silence, you can indeed sing.
Well, absolutely lovely. Yes, drink from the river of silence, can you sing? Well, totally, wholeheartedly, I would echo that. Yet how few people would understand it. A long time ago, I suppose I've always loved silence, but there were certainly times when I was a more social sort of young man and felt I had to make conversation, and felt a failure if I was silent. And I know I've made this point before on these videos, but it's such a sweet thing, because one of the most comforting things I was ever told in my early years at the school where I learnt meditation was, when you don't know what to say, or you have nothing to say nothing. And I was at a party soon after that, a sort of Christmas party, and I got into my usual rather embarrassed state of not knowing what to say, and I remembered this instruction, and I stood back by the fireplace, and I was just silent, and suddenly I felt confident that I didn't have to be pretending to say something, and try to make interesting conversation. I could just be silent, and surprisingly enough, the evening went rather well. I think somebody came up and spoke to me, and I can't remember what I said, but so that really changed my whole attitude towards it. I did begin to then grow in confidence that I could be silent, and actually some other people rather liked it too. It's rather a comforting thing to be sometimes with other people. It isn't always talk that's best, is it? some few, rather few people actually love being silent.